Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The rain had not stopped all morning, painting the city streets in shades of silver and gray. Inside the small animal shelter on Fifth Avenue, Lila Evans was scrubbing the floor with sleeves rolled up and hair tied in a messy bun. She was exhausted, but her eyes still held that quiet fire, the one that came from saving lives no one else noticed. Across the room, a golden retriever barked weakly, paw wrapped in gauze. "Hang in there, Cooper," she whispered, gently patting his head. It was the last patient of the day before she had to face reality: the shelter's eviction notice taped to the door, the overdue medical bills for her little sister's treatment, and the creeping fear that she would lose everything she had worked for. But fate never asks for permission. That afternoon, as she stepped out to grab coffee, a black SUV screeched to a halt on the curb. A man jumped out, tall, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit now splashed with rain. His eyes, cold and sharp like a blade, locked on her. "You," he said flatly, pointing at her, "you are the woman who rescued my dog." She blinked, startled. It took her a moment to recognize the face she had seen once on the news. Ethan Ward, 34, tech magnate, one of the youngest self-made billionaires in New York. Before she could answer, he continued, "I owe you for that. But I also have a proposal, one that could help both of us." The way he said it made her freeze. "A proposal?" she echoed, half amused, half wary. "What kind of proposal comes from a man like you?" Ethan's gaze did not waver. "A business one. I need a wife temporarily. 3 months. It is a contractual arrangement, nothing more. You will attend public events with me, wear a ring, and in return, I will fund your entire shelter for the next 5 years. Lila stared at him, stunned. The sound of traffic blurred around them, the city suddenly distant. "You want me to pretend to be your wife?" He nodded once. "Yes, I need someone real. Someone who does not care about money or fame. You risked your life for a dog you did not own. That tells me enough." Her first instinct was to laugh, to walk away, but then she remembered the pile of unpaid bills on her kitchen counter, the empty food shelves at the shelter, and the way her sister's voice trembled when she said, "Lila, do not worry about me." Maybe this was the lifeline she did not know she needed. "What are the conditions?" she asked quietly. Ethan pulled a folded document from his coat. "3 rules," he said. "First, no real affection in public unless required. Second, no media interviews without approval. Third, when it is over, we walk away as strangers." Lila took the paper, scanning the fine print, her pulse thudding in her ears. "You really treat marriage like a business deal," she murmured. "That is exactly what it is," he replied. "A temporary arrangement. It ends cleanly." She lifted her eyes to him, her voice steady. "And what if someone gets hurt?" For a brief moment, something flickered in his expression: loneliness, maybe even regret, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "Then we stick to the contract," he said. She exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the moment. "All right, Mr. Ward. You have yourself a fake wife." His hand extended toward her, firm and certain. "Then welcome to the deal, Mrs. Ward." The handshake sealed their fates, not knowing that behind the rain-soaked handshake and the paper contract, something real had already begun to stir, a story neither of them could have negotiated. The following morning, the world looked strangely different to Lila. Maybe it was the contract folded neatly in her purse, or the echo of Ethan Ward's calm voice repeating, "It is just business." She stood in front of a glass tower downtown, her reflection dwarfed by the polished marble and mirrored windows. Security guards nodded her through after confirming her name. A woman in a black suit greeted her briskly. "Miss Evans, Mr. Ward is waiting in conference room 12. Every step Lila took sounded too loud against the silent hallway. When she entered, Ethan was already there, seated at the end of a long table with a coffee untouched beside a stack of papers. He looked up, expression unreadable. "You came." Lila crossed her arms. "I said I would." He gestured to the chair opposite him. "We will sign the notarized copy today. After that, you will meet my assistant, Harper. She will help with your wardrobe and schedule. The first event is a charity gala on Saturday." Lila sat slowly, her heart pounding. So this is really happening. Ethan's lips curved faintly. "You wanted to save your shelter. I need stability in the press. This helps us both." He slid a pen toward her. "Shall we?" Her fingers trembled slightly as she signed her name beside his. The black ink bled into the paper like a promise she could not take back. Ethan stood, buttoning his jacket. "Good. Now we begin." Later that afternoon, Harper led her through the transformation process. Racks of designer dresses lined the studio, mirrors surrounded by white bulbs reflected a version of Lila she barely recognized. "Mr. Ward prefers neutral tones, clean, elegant," Harper explained, placing a pale ivory gown in her hands. "You will attend as Mrs. Lila Ward. People will ask questions. Smile, but say very little." The phrase echoed in her head like an instruction she was not sure she could follow. By evening, she found herself standing in the penthouse apartment Ethan called homey, a place of glass walls, city lights, and quiet so heavy it felt lonely. Cooper, the golden retriever, ran to greet her, tail wagging. She knelt down, laughing softly. "At least you remember me." Ethan appeared behind her, still in his suit, sleeves rolled up now. "He is more social than I am," he said dryly. She glanced up at him. "That is not hard to believe." His eyes narrowed, but there was the faintest flicker of amusement. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow we have a photo shoot for the engagement announcement." "Engagement announcement," she repeated, startled. "Yes. We have to make it look real." He walked to the window, city lights painting his profile in silver. "People will believe what they see. You and I, smiling, standing close. The illusion of affection." Lila swallowed. "You sound like you have done this before." "I have done business before," he replied quietly. "This is just another deal." She wanted to argue, to tell him that love could not be planned on a spreadsheet, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It was not arrogance. It was emptiness. She realized then that this man, with all his money and power, was just as alone as the animals she rescued. That night, lying in the guest bedroom of his penthouse, she stared at the ceiling, the sound of the rain returning like a lullaby. Somewhere down the hall, Ethan worked late, light spilling under his office door. Lila whispered into the quiet, "What have I gotten myself into?" 2 days later, the world knew her name. Headlines read, "Ethan Ward engaged to animal rescuer." Cameras flashed as they stepped out of a black car in front of the gala venue. Lila wore the ivory gown, her hair swept back, diamonds glinting at her throat. Ethan offered his arm, formal, distant, perfect. "Ready, Mrs. Ward?" he murmured. She took his arm, smiling for the cameras. "As ready as I will ever be." The crowd cheered, the flashes burned, and for a moment, under the storm of light and whispers, she wondered if anyone else could see through the act, two strangers pretending to belong together. Yet when Ethan leaned down slightly to whisper, "Just breathe," she felt something unexpected. Maybe this contract would break her heart. Or maybe, for once, it would teach her what love actually looked like when it was not pretending. The next morning began with flashes of cameras and the low hum of reporters outside Ethan Ward's corporate headquarters. Inside, Lila sat in a makeup chair as Harper adjusted a pearl earring and whispered, "Smile but do not overdo it. Confidence, not comfort." The engagement photo shoot was staged in the company atrium, full of flowers and light, but the air felt heavy with expectation. Ethan stood beside her, immaculate in a gray suit, his hand hovering near hers. "Look at me," he said under his breath as the photographer raised the camera. Lila turned, their eyes meeting for the briefest second. The camera clicked, capturing a moment that almost looked real. "Perfect," the photographer said, unaware that behind the smiles, Lila's pulse was racing. Hours later, back in the penthouse, she kicked off her heels and let out a long breath. Cooper bounded over and laid his head on her lap. "You are the only one here who is not pretending," she whispered. Ethan entered the room, still holding his phone, voice sharp from a call. "Cancel the investors' dinner. Move it to Monday," he ordered before hanging up. His eyes softened slightly when he saw her. "Long day?" She nodded. "I did not know acting could be this exhausting." He poured himself a glass of water. "It gets easier once you stop caring what people think." "You mean, when you stop feeling anything at all," she replied quietly. He froze, then set the glass down. "Feelings complicate things, Lila. They make people reckless." "Maybe," she said, standing. "But they also make people human." The words hung in the air between them. For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of Cooper's tail thumping broke the tension. Ethan cleared his throat. "I have a board meeting early. Try to rest." She watched him leave, the distance between them feeling wider than the penthouse itself. Over the next week, they moved through a series of public appearances, charity luncheons, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, and interviews. Lila smiled on cue, memorized her lines, and pretended that every look from Ethan meant something more than business. But small cracks began to show in his armor. One night after a gala, she found him on the balcony, jacket off, staring at the skyline. "You are not coming inside?" she asked softly. "The noise gets too much," he admitted. "Everyone wants something from me. Money, attention, validation. No one actually sees me." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "Maybe you do not let them." He turned to her, eyes tired but honest. "And you? What do you want from me?" The question caught her off guard. She opened her mouth but no words came. Finally, she said, "I want to finish this deal without losing myself." Ethan's expression softened. "That makes two of us." Later that night, as she lay in bed, she heard him talking quietly on the phone. His tone was low, private, almost vulnerable. "No, Father, it is under control. Yes, the engagement is real enough for the board to relax. No, I do not plan to let anyone close." The words pierced her heart more than she expected. She turned to face the wall, whispering to herself, "You really mean it is just a deal?" The next day, Harper arrived with a new schedule and a warning. "The media is digging deeper. Someone leaked your background, Lila. They know about the shelter debts." Lila's stomach sank. "Let them. I have nothing to hide." Harper frowned. "Maybe you do not, but Ethan does. He hates vulnerability, and this will make him furious." When Ethan came home that night, his jaw was tight, his tone clipped. "The press found out about your debts. They think this is a sympathy ploy. That you are using me." Lila stepped forward. "Ethan, that is not true." "Perception matters more than truth," he interrupted. "I will handle it, but for now, stay quiet." "You mean hide," she said bitterly. His eyes met hers, a storm of pride and pain. "I mean protect what we built." She stared at him, realizing how different their definitions of "we" really were. As he walked away, she whispered, "What we built, or what you control?" But he did not turn around. The city outside flickered with light, but inside, everything between them dimmed a little more. And yet, as Cooper rested his head on her knees, Lila felt something stubborn awaken inside her, a quiet promise that she would not let this fake marriage break her heart without teaching her something true. The following week brought no peace. The tabloids kept spinning stories about Lila Evans, the mysterious fiancée who came from nothing. Every headline stung, not because of the lies, but because Ethan said nothing to defend her. In the penthouse, silence had become a third presence. They spoke only when cameras required it, rehearsing lines of affection that felt colder every day. One Friday evening, Harper handed Lila a list of etiquette notes for the upcoming board gala. "Mr. Ward's father will be there," she said quietly. "He is old money and expects perfection. Please, do not take it personally if he tests you." Lila nodded, though her stomach twisted. That night, she stood before the mirror in a midnight blue gown, her reflection looking too poised, too polished to be the same woman who once scrubbed shelter floors. When Ethan appeared behind her, his expression softened for the first time in days. "You look," he stopped, searching for the word. "Different," she teased, meeting his gaze in the mirror. "Beautiful," he said simply. The honesty in his tone startled her. For a moment, the air between them changed. But then his phone rang, and the moment vanished. "I will meet you downstairs," he said, stepping away. At the gala, chandeliers glowed and laughter floated like champagne bubbles. Lila walked beside Ethan, arm linked with his, feeling the weight of every curious stare. Mr. Ward Sr. greeted them at the entrance, his silver hair perfectly combed, his smile thin as glass. "So this is the young lady who has captured my son's attention," he said, voice laced with skepticism. "I have heard quite a story about your humble beginnings." Lila smiled politely. "Yes, sir. I used to work with animals." "Animals," he repeated, the word dripping disdain. "How quaint." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The dinner dragged on until a board member named Victor leaned forward, smirking. "Tell us, Mrs. Ward, how does one go from washing kennels to wearing diamonds?" The table chuckled. Lila's face burned, but she steadied her voice. "Hard work, I suppose. And a little faith that kindness still matters." The laughter faltered, the silence sharp. Then someone clapped Ethan. "That is why I chose her," he said, eyes fixed on her. "Because she reminds me that success means nothing if it costs your soul." For the first time, Lila saw pride in his expression, not calculation. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of polite applause and softened whispers. Later, outside in the cool night air, Lila turned to him. "You defended me." "You defended yourself," he replied quietly. "I just made sure they heard it." The city lights shimmered around them, and for a heartbeat, the world felt still. Back home, they shared a quiet dinner in the kitchen, just soup, bread, and Cooper asleep nearby. Lila laughed softly. "The mighty Ethan Ward eats soup?" "Do not tell the investors," he said, smiling faintly. His phone buzzed again, but this time he ignored it. "Do you ever stop working?" she asked. "It is easier than thinking," he admitted. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the exhaustion beneath the polished surface. "You do not have to carry everything alone, you know?" He met her eyes, something raw flickering there. "And you do not have to keep pretending you are fine." The words caught her off guard, but they sank deep. The silence that followed was not awkward, it was safe. For the first time, Ethan reached across the table and touched her hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For not being afraid of me." She smiled faintly. "I should be." "Maybe," he said, "but you are not." That night, Lila lay awake, staring at the city beyond the window. Something was shifting between them, something fragile, dangerous, and undeniably real. She had signed a contract to play a role, but every day, the lines between performance and truth blurred a little more. And though she did not want to admit it, the thought of the contract ending no longer brought her relief, it brought fear. The following week marked the beginning of something Lila Evans could not quite name. The air inside the penthouse felt different, lighter, warmer. Ethan had begun coming home earlier, sometimes even joining her on the balcony where Cooper liked to nap. They would talk about small things, the weather, the news, a funny headline, and for the first time since the contract began, their conversations did not feel rehearsed. One evening, Lila was cooking pasta when Ethan appeared at the doorway, sleeves rolled up, tie undone. "You cook?" he asked, sounding genuinely surprised. She glanced over her shoulder. I had to learn. You cannot exactly live off delivery forever. I manage, he said, smiling faintly. She handed him a spoon. Taste this. He hesitated but took a bite. His eyes widened slightly. It is good. See, she teased. There is life outside spreadsheets. He leaned against the counter, watching her with a curiosity she could feel. You make it sound easy. It is not, she replied, stirring the sauce. But it is real. Later that night, they watched an old movie together, laughter echoing through the penthouse that once felt like a museum. When the credits rolled, Ethan murmured, "It has been a long time since I laughed like that." Lila turned to him. Maybe you just needed better company. His gaze softened, and for a moment, the silence between them felt almost intimate. But the world outside their fragile peace had other plans. The next morning, Harper arrived with bad news. Victor from the board is pushing for a financial audit, she said quietly. He claims your engagement was a publicity stunt to distract from declining profits. Ethan's jaw tightened. He wants a reason to challenge my leadership. Harper hesitated before adding, and he is using Lila to do it. There are rumors he plans to leak details about the contract. Lila's stomach dropped. He knows? Ethan's voice hardened. I will handle it. But that afternoon, during a charity event for animal rescue, the situation escalated. Reporters surrounded them as they stepped off the stage, microphones flashing. One voice shouted above the noise, "Miss Evans, is it true your marriage is fake? That you are being paid to play wife?" Lila froze, the world spinning around her. Ethan moved in front of her, expression steel. That is enough, he said, his tone low and dangerous. Cameras clicked wildly as he guided her away, his hand firm on her back. Inside the car, silence pressed heavy between them. Ethan, she whispered, you cannot protect me from this. His eyes darkened. Watch me. The next morning, tabloids exploded with headlines, Ward marriage scandal, love or lie? Lila avoided the internet entirely, but the whispers followed her everywhere. At the office, staff avoided eye contact. At home, her phone rang nonstop with interview requests. That night, Ethan returned late, his face shadowed with exhaustion. The board demanded an internal review, he said quietly. They want proof our marriage is legitimate. Lila frowned. What kind of proof? Public display. They want an interview, a live one. Her breath caught. They want us to act more like a real couple. Ethan nodded. Exactly. The irony was bitter. They had been learning to be real in private, but now the world demanded they pretend again. During the interview, under bright studio lights, Lila sat beside Ethan as the host smiled too brightly. So, how did you two meet? She asked. Lila answered smoothly, the practice story flowing like a script, but halfway through, Ethan surprised her. He reached for her hand on camera. The truth is, he said, voice steady, I thought I was saving my company when I met her. But she ended up saving me. The host blinked, caught off guard. Lila looked at him, heart pounding. It was not in the script. It was real. When the interview ended, she whispered, why did you say that? He smiled faintly. Because it was true. But that truth came with a price. The next morning, Victor released confidential documents, the contract. Every clause, every signature, every dollar attached to her name was now public. The headlines turned vicious, love bought and sold. Lila's face appeared everywhere, branded a fraud. Ethan's company stock plummeted. She stood in his office doorway, holding the newspaper with shaking hands. They will destroy you because of me, she said softly. Ethan looked up, eyes weary but resolute. They will not destroy either of us, he said. I will not let them. But she could see the strain behind his words. The empire he had built on control was crumbling, and for the first time, she realized he might break before admitting he was human. As she turned to leave, he called after her. Lila, whatever happens next, do not disappear. She hesitated in the doorway, heart twisting. I cannot promise that, she whispered. And with that, the illusion of safety that had carried them began to shatter. The next few days unfolded like a storm with no mercy. The contract leak had gone viral, spreading across every media outlet in the country. The headlines called her a liar, a gold digger, and worse. Lila Evans stopped leaving the penthouse entirely. The city below continued to move, indifferent to her shame. Inside, she watched as Ethan Ward's world began to crack. Board members demanded emergency meetings. Sponsors withdrew their deals. Investors pulled out. Every night he came home later, his expression harder, his voice colder. But she could see the quiet exhaustion behind his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly when he thought no one was looking. One evening, she found him sitting alone in the darkened living room, the glow from his laptop painting his face pale. You should rest, she said softly. Resting does not fix this, he replied without looking up. Then what will, she asked. He closed the laptop slowly. I do not know. It was the first time she had ever heard him admit uncertainty. Lila stepped closer, her voice quiet. You cannot fight every battle alone, Ethan. He looked up at her, eyes filled with a mix of anger and defeat. I built everything by myself, Lila. I cannot start needing someone now. She knelt beside him, her hand resting gently on his sleeve. Needing someone does not make you weak. It makes you real. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, almost imperceptibly, he whispered, you should leave. The world hates you because of me. She shook her head. No, they hate me because I made them question what love looks like. He stared at her, and for a brief moment, something broke inside the fortress he had built. But before she could speak again, Harper appeared at the door. Ethan, Victor called a press conference for tomorrow morning. He is demanding your resignation. The words hung in the air like thunder. Lila's heart sank. You cannot let him do this, she said. Ethan stood slowly. He has the board. He has the votes. There is nothing left to fight. The next morning, the press conference filled the lobby of Ward Enterprises. Cameras flashed as Victor stepped up to the podium, smiling like a man who had already won. Lila stood hidden near the back, watching Ethan's silhouette through the glare. When it was his turn to speak, the crowd hushed. Yes, Ethan began, a contract existed. It was a mistake mine. Murmurs spread instantly, but he continued. What started as a transaction became something I did not expect. It became real. I will not apologize for that. The crowd erupted with questions, reporters shouting his name. But Lila could barely hear them. Her chest tightened with pride and heartbreak all at once. Afterward, she found him outside near the service exit, his tie loosened, shoulders heavy. You told them the truth, she said quietly. I told them enough, he replied. It will not change anything. She hesitated. You could have blamed me. He met her gaze. I would never. She wanted to tell him that his words meant everything, but the silence between them said it for her. That night, she packed her things. Ethan tried to protest. Lila, do not do this. She turned, tears glimmering in her eyes. You said it yourself. You built everything alone. Maybe it is time I remember how to do the same. His voice broke for the first time. Please, do not walk away. She stepped closer, her hand trembling as it touched his face. This was supposed to be fake, remember? Maybe walking away is the only real part left. And then she kissed him not out of obligation, not for the cameras, but because she knew it might be the last time. When she pulled back, he whispered her name, but she was already gone. Days turned into weeks. The media moved on to new scandals, but Ethan did not. He threw himself into rebuilding the company, the penthouse emptier than ever. One evening, Harper entered his office quietly. "You should see this," she said, setting a folder on his desk. Inside was a photo of Lila standing in front of a new sign, Cooper's Haven, a rescue foundation. Beneath it were the words, "Funded by anonymous donations." Harper smiled faintly. "She is doing well." Ethan traced the edge of the photo with his thumb. "She always would." Alone in his office, he stared at the skyline she used to love, whispering to the empty room, "You saved me, Lila. I just wish I had saved you back." The city outside glittered indifferently, but somewhere beneath the noise, the faint echo of hope remained, waiting for its turn to return. Months passed, and the chill of winter began to fade. Lila Evans's foundation, Cooper's Haven, had grown faster than she imagined. Donations came in from across the country, and her shelter was full of life again. Still, even as she smiled for photos and spoke at charity events, something inside her remained unfinished. Every time she passed the tall buildings of Manhattan, she thought of him, the man who had taught her that walls could protect, but they could also imprison. Meanwhile, Ethan Ward had become a ghost in his own empire. He returned to work, restored the company's reputation, and silenced Victor's smear campaign, but the victory felt hollow. His board applauded him for saving the business, yet when he looked at the city skyline from his office window, all he saw was the reflection of a woman who no longer stood beside him. Harper watched him decline quietly, his suits crisp but his eyes tired. "You built everything back," she said one evening, "but you look like you lost more than before." Ethan's reply was quiet. "Because I did." One day, a letter arrived at Cooper's Haven. It was unmarked, written on cream stationery with no return address. Inside was a single sentence in familiar handwriting, "You once said kindness can change the world, prove it at the gala next Friday." At first, Lila thought it was a prank, but something about the words felt real. The following Friday, the annual Ward Enterprises Charity Gala returned to New York. Lila had no intention of attending, yet as the evening approached, she found herself standing outside the glass tower in a simple black dress, her heart pounding. Inside, the event glittered with luxury, champagne, and polished smiles. Ethan stood on stage delivering his closing speech, thanking donors for supporting animal welfare initiatives. His voice was calm, professional until he paused. "Before we end tonight," he said slowly, "there is someone I owe more than any investor or partner. She taught me that compassion is not weakness and that love cannot be written into a contract." The crowd murmured as the lights dimmed. A screen behind him lit up, showing the words, "The Lila Evans Rescue Grant Supporting Kindness in Action." Ethan continued, "This foundation will provide permanent funding for Cooper's Haven and every rescue shelter inspired by it." The audience erupted in applause, but Ethan did not move. His gaze searched the room until it landed on her. Lila stood near the back, frozen in disbelief. Their eyes met, and in that instant, the months of silence collapsed between them. He stepped down from the stage, the crowd parting like waves. When he reached her, he simply said, "I told you I would not let them destroy us." "I meant it." Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Why would you still do this?" He smiled faintly. "Because you saved me first." The music swelled, flashes from cameras lighting the room, but for Ethan and Lila, the world had gone quiet. After months of distance and pain, something unspoken found its voice, Agina beginning disguised as an ending. The applause faded into a gentle hum, and for a long moment, neither Lila Evans nor Ethan Ward moved. It was as if the world had slowed down just for them. Lila's voice trembled when she finally spoke. "Ethan, you did not have to do this." He shook his head slowly. "Yes, I did. You spent your life saving others, Lila. I had to show you that someone could save you too." She blinked through tears. "But you already did that the day you believed in me." Ethan stepped closer, his voice quiet but steady. "No, that day you believed in me. You showed me how to care again. I cannot undo what happened, but I can choose what comes next." Around them, the gala continued, but the lights seemed softer, the music distant. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a simple silver ring, the same one from the contract. When we started this, he said, this ring meant obligation, rules, and limits. Now it means something else. A new deal. No signatures, no contracts. Just truth. Lila stared at him, her breath catching. Are you asking me to start over? Ethan smiled faintly. I am asking you to stay this time without pretending. For a moment she could not speak. The memories of the tabloids, the shame, the nights alone, they all collided with the man standing in front of her now, stripped of power and pride, asking not for forgiveness, but for a chance. Slowly, she took the ring from his hand. If I say yes, she whispered, we will have to rebuild everything from the beginning. Then let us start tonight, he said, voice low. No headlines, no expectations. Just you, me, and the truth. The crowd around them cheered again as if the universe itself approved. She slid the ring onto her finger, tears spilling freely now. Ethan exhaled like a man finally allowed to breathe. You were never part of my plan, Lila, he said softly, but somehow, you became the best part of my life. She smiled through her tears. And you were never part of my rescue plan either, Ethan. But you turned out to be the one who needed saving the most. Cameras flashed, capturing what no one could script, the way his hand rested gently at her back, the way her head tilted toward him, the unspoken promise in their eyes. The audience rose in applause, unaware that they were witnessing not a publicity stunt, but a redemption story unfolding in real time. Ethan leaned in, his voice barely a whisper. You once asked me what happens when someone gets hurt. Lila looked up at him, her heart pounding. And what did you find out? You heal, he said. You forgive. And if you are lucky, you love again. The music swelled as they embraced, two broken souls who had finally chosen each other not out of duty, but out of truth. For the first time, the world saw them as they truly were, not a deal, not a facade, but a promise rewritten in the language of love. A year later, the world looked very different for Lila Evans and Ethan Ward. The once cold penthouse had turned into a home filled with laughter, sunlight, and the occasional bark from Cooper, who had claimed every couch as his own. Lila had transformed one of the spare rooms into an office for the foundation, its walls covered with photos of rescued animals and volunteers. Ethan no longer lived behind a desk or a boardroom table. He still ran Ward Enterprises, but his priorities had changed. Mornings began with coffee that he learned to brew terribly, and evenings ended with quiet walks with Lila through the city streets that had once felt so distant. One spring afternoon, they stood together at the opening of the new Cooper's Haven headquarters, surrounded by cameras and reporters. Lila wore a white sundress, her hair loose, the same smile she used to hide now shining freely. Ethan stood beside her, holding her hand. You did this, he whispered as the crowd applauded. She shook her head, smiling. No, we did this. When the ribbon was cut, Cooper ran ahead, the first to cross the threshold, tail wagging wildly. Lila laughed as Ethan slipped his arm around her shoulders. Remember when this all started, he asked softly. A contract, a fake marriage, and two people too stubborn to admit they needed each other. She nodded. The best mistakes start that way. That evening, after the celebration ended and the guests had gone, they returned to the penthouse. The city glowed below them, alive but peaceful. Ethan handed her a small velvet box. Before you open it, he said, no contracts this time. No conditions. Lila opened the box slowly. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, and real. Ethan, she breathed, tears forming instantly. He took the ring, his voice steady. Last time, I asked you to marry me for the sake of my company. This time, I am asking you to marry me for the sake of my heart. Lila's tears fell freely as she nodded, unable to find words. Yes, she whispered finally, 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, the same hand that had once signed a contract but now carried a promise written only in love. As the clock struck midnight, they danced barefoot in the living room, the city lights flickering through the glass like distant stars. Cooper curled up nearby, as if watching over the ending he had unknowingly begun. Lila rested her head on Ethan's chest, listening to the steady rhythm beneath. "Do you ever think about how far we have come?" she murmured. "Every day," he replied. "And I would still choose you, even if it meant starting over 1,000 times." She smiled softly, closing her eyes. "Then here is to starting over again and again." The night outside stretched wide and full of promise. There were no cameras, no contracts, no deals, only two people who had learned that love, at its purest, is not about perfection, but persistence. Their story had begun with a lie, but it ended with something far more powerful, the truth. And as the lights dimmed, Ethan whispered into her hair, "You were the best deal I ever made." Lila laughed quietly, her voice warm against his chest. "No, Ethan," she said. "We stopped making deals a long time ago. This is just love."